What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Hardworking Happy Hour. I'm Sean.
And I am Catherine, and as always, we'll be breaking down all things trades, entrepreneurship, and turning your creativity into a passion career.
And we have an exceptionally exciting guest today. We have Glenn Matthewson. Is it Matthewson or Matheson?
Matthewson.
Matthewson,
Get that
okay.
W in there.
Get that W in there. Glenn Matthewson, the penultimate deck and building code man, wizard, expert,
loudmouth,
yeah, cheerleader, advocate.
Yeah, advocate.
What else? What do we got? What other kind of
freedom fighter,
seeking
balance and collaboration with others in what the built environment should be.
So for those of you that are not familiar with Glenn Matthewson, he is the king of codes. He is somebody that has found a way to make building codes interesting, and even on TikTok, he has found his footing.
That's where I follow you on TikTok, and I feel like you explain things so nicely. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's where he found his footing.
His footing, yeah. I got it.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to gloss over it. That was a good. That was a good one. That was a good.
Yeah. That's where he really found his peering. All right, that was a stretch. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I forgot what I was saying now.
That I'm awesome on TikTok.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what it was. Exactly. You're awesome on TikTok, and you're great at explaining things.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and I think there is an age-old battle between contractors and the powers that be, the building department and the inspector.
Yes.
And I think you are bringing some peace. You are an olive branch, metaphorically, kind of bridging the gap between the frustrations that builders have with the building department, and also explaining to builders the reason why these things are important. And how really, if you are a legit builder, that you need to respect this and realize that it's there in the end to benefit you. It's to weed out the people that, I mean, hopefully some people still get through without the permit and do really shoddy work, but in the end, it's supposed to protect the builder, protect the homeowner, protect lives. I think.
No, absolutely. Folks, life safety, you mentioned protecting lives. I mean, I hear that all the time. The code is about life safety. The code is about life safety. And yes, that is one component of it, but that's really not at all even the complete story. Building codes are about society's expectation of the built environment. And that includes all aspects of things. And that's why the code is always chasing society, and it should always chase society. Now, there are times that folks try to propose ideas or things where we would have the code leading society. That's where you get into the talk of agendas and what's the narrative, right? And we can get into that whole discussion. But really, society is supposed to be free to explore, to innovate new technologies, new ideas based on the desires of we the people, what we're looking for. And then the building code comes behind that and provides protections, regulations, establishes benchmarks and baselines for what the society has decided. But I think that one of the biggest things that I see out there confused with builders in code is there's two codes. There's government code, and then there's the model code. And the model code is revised and redone every 3 years to stay current and follow society. Anyone can propose a change to that proposal. It's 100%, or to that code. It's all transparent. All of the records are clear. It's international. All opinions are welcome. And then they're balanced out to create this model code. That is then suggested to governments to say, hey, here's a starting point for your governance. But governments, well, they're also often behind the times, and in some localities they're ahead of the times. We have that as well. Governments leading, people are following. So a lot of governments, maybe I brought it up in my presentation here at the Deck Superstore in Colorado, we have jurisdictions that have no building code, and then we have them on every edition of the I code from 2000 to 21.
Yeah.
So the government code that you're happy that you passed inspection could be 15-year-old information. What if you were using the decking products from 15 years ago, or the tools, or the cameras, or the drones?
Yeah.
Everything else we update but we stick with government code as this benchmark. So that's something I try to really make a distinction of, is there's the government code, satisfy the local rules. There's the model code, elevate your ceiling as a professional.
Yeah. Do you ever find that, because that was something that I didn't necessarily know, that every time there's an IRC update, that it's not necessarily adopted by the townships. They could be working off the 2009 version or whatever. Yep. And a lot of them do. When you actually go and look at what they are basing their inspections on, it is on a very outdated, code. Is there ever... I have the feeling that usually the codes, as they progress and as new codes come out, it is usually building to a higher standard. But are there some things where, in a previous code, it might have been maybe a little bit overkill, and now... Yeah.
Yeah, I'm itching. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Like, these are the truths that you don't hear. I've attended the ICC code hearings for the last decade, first in 2013 for the creation of the 2015 code. And yes, so I'll give you some examples. I can think of two really quickly. Mini deck builders prior to, I believe it changed in the 15 code. The 2009 IRC, we had to measure guard height from bench surfaces. There was a change, and this was related to children climbing rails. This is way back from the history of horizontal rails. In 2000 code, that was pulled. There was a committee that reevaluated that, and they came out with, you need to measure the guard height from fixed bench seating. And so we have lots of decks where people are building built-in bench seating into the guard, and now that guard would need to be not 36 inches high, but 4.5 feet high if you have an 18-inch high bench.
Yeah.
Well, the Colorado chapter of ICC, which is a local chapter of the International Code Council, and the majority of the members are the local building inspectors around here. They have a code change committee where they come together and suggest changes. They propose to eliminate that and not measure from fixed seating anymore, because builders were simply making the seating not fixed. They were just building the furniture and detaching. And we basically argued, this is furniture. But the interesting thing is, so in the 2015, that was reversed. But what I love is it actually came from building inspectors that reversed it. And then one you can see in current codes, and this is something that I teach in modern times now, the 2021 IRC increased, this is off deck subject, but it increased the requirement, instead of a 6 mil vapor retarder under concrete on slab, concrete on grade floors, it upped it to a 10 mil vapor retarder that has to comply with an ASTM standard. That went in the 21 code, approved, changed for 21. 24 code, the NAHB argued that there's not sufficient products on the market that meet that, and that there's just not enough need for that heavy thickness of a vapor retarder, and immediately it went back to the 6 mil. So that's an example where you saw it literally change from one edition and change right back in the next edition. And it's the importance of speaking, of not just accepting things as they are, but every year is up for reevaluation, and a new person can come and make a new argument.
That's something I didn't quite realize, the process of how these codes come about. It seems like for a lot of people that are out there building, it's just like, this is just the code. It comes from somewhere high above. I don't know where these things come from, but I have to abide by it. But something I've seen from following you, and you really push that this is a collaborative experience, and anyone is welcome to submit these things. I think you posted some stuff of you presenting in front of some sort of hearing on these things, and it kind of makes it more, you kind of see how these things happen. It's like the chambers of construction government. You kind of see what's happening behind the scenes, and you realize you can kind of have a voice in this. You don't just have to accept these things how they are, and that's like something through Nadra. I know you work with them a lot, that they kind of like put that platform out there where an individual builder can kind of at least give input to somebody like you that's then going to like be more involved in the process. And I think more than anything, it it makes you accept the things that you might not totally agree with or think are a little bit overkill in the code, and you say, you know what, this is one little negative side effect of this collaborative effort, but essentially I do have some say in this, and if it's really bothering me that much that, hey, I can go and present at these hearings or whatever and propose a change to it, and I think that it just makes it feel a little bit less like you're just abiding by this nameless, faceless committee that you don't really have any interaction with. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. One of the things that I really also just love about attending the hearings is it is one of the most educational opportunities out there, because it's not just like going to a class and you're given facts that have already been determined and established, and now you just learn this. Mm-hmm. You go there and you'll listen. I remember vividly in the 2021 codes, what's the big trend, right, in society, right? Electric cars and electrification. And so energy storage systems becoming more popular. And so in 2021, there were lots of changes to energy storage systems in the code, and you literally had Toyota and Tesla at building code hearings sharing their experience and knowledge and expertise about electric cars and electric storage systems. And you get up there and you listen to this Tesla expert or whatever, and it's just like, wow, that's amazing. That is so like, God, that guy knows what he's talking about. Yeah. And then the other expert comes up in opposition, and you're like, wait, that's really interesting too, and that guy really knows what he's talking to. And what you come to realize is that there aren't definitive answers to most of the questions the code provides. There are independent experts and experts with organizations on both sides, and they both have great arguments. And so it's bringing them together, and you realize that, that it's not this perfect thing that's been delivered through some amazing. It's an amazing process, but it's the humans, we're still all involved with it. Yeah. So ICC gives you education credits for renewing your code certifications for attending the hearings, because it is so educational. So if you're in a deck builder, but it may be, again, if you're in construction and you have an interest in these things, and you know that the ICC hearings are in your town, is no cost to attend. You can leave anytime you want. Pop in and sit down for a little bit and see how it's made. Yeah. It'll be eye-opening.
I would love to do that.
I would love to do that too.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to hear. And I think it's when I hear you get excited about certain elements of the building code, it's the elements of, the things that aren't so definitive. I think a lot of people, the things that they get frustrated with in the building code are typically the things like that fixed rail height. Like, okay, this is not, it's not like a structural engineering type of thing on the strength and the durability of this. It's more of, is this safe? Is this not safe? And people get kind of caught up on those little things that are just kind of like annoying little details. But I think when you look at it in a different light and you start not only just trying to like memorize this part of the code, this has to be this way, but you look at it as far as, why is it like that? Like, what about this? Why can't you drill a hole through a joist here, but you can over here? Why can you notch out a bird's mouth for a rafter cut? But what are the parameters? I remember I reached out to you about all these different things about, okay, I know we kind of cut a bird's mouth a standard way, but we were in a situation where like I wanted to get it a little bit lower. I'm like, can I just cut more out of the bird's mouth? What is how much of this? So I reached out to you, and you were like, look at this portion of the code, and this is going to explain exactly what you need. This is the height above plate. This is, I forget what it was, cut 1/3 out of the height, and it was like, when you look at that stuff and you go a little bit deeper into like the technical engineering of it, I think that's really fascinating. And a lot of builders would get more excited about it, but they get stuck on the really annoying things. Like, our step tread has a 3/4 inch nosing overhang instead of a 1 inch, and some jurisdictions care about that. And it seems like such a minuscule thing. It doesn't affect the quality of the build, but, I think that's such a small part of the building code. Most of it is really interesting and exciting. Like, how do they come up with these things? And what, once you learn that, you can kind of learn how to use those codes and those parameters to like build cooler structures.
Yeah.
I think that's what's interesting.
Totally. Again, if folks are only learning the code, air quotes, via continually taking exams over and over again, the inspection process, the plan review process, that's essentially just an exam. There's been no prior, like where was the teaching prior to taking the exam? But so many folks' understanding of code is through iterations of exams, right? What did the inspector not catch? What did the inspector catch? But none of that is presenting to say, you did it this way, like you did something some way and it's fine. So the inspector said nothing, passed inspection. But you never knew that you could actually do it 5 different other ways.
Yeah.
But you just think it always has to be done this way because that's how it, and you did it a different way and it failed. Well, that wasn't one of the other 5 ways you can do it.
Yeah.
And so when you actually go into the code to learn it as your tool, as a professional, not as a government weapon, you realize, oh my gosh, this offers me way more choice and flexibility than I realized. Headers is one of those examples I teach in my class. Like the code gives multiple ways to build headers. And that's off of decks, but in opening in a wall. And the code, and it does that with decks as well. There's lots of opportunity in there for cantilevering joists, cantilevering beams, notching at bearing. A lot of builders don't know you can notch a 2x10 at bearing down to the height of a 2x8, and they would say, oh well, now I can only consider it a 2x8. No, you can still span it as a 2x10.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for it.
Yeah.
You have to actively choose on your own to make the code yours, not a response of your government.
Something that I just looked into recently was collar ties, and being able to remove collar ties and replace them with strapping from rafter to rafter over top of the ridge. And it was always my just, general understanding based on nothing really, I guess, that collar ties are going to keep your walls from moving out. And then I started looking into the fact that you can strap over the top, and then I realized the purpose of collar ties is actually not for that.
Yeah.
That's what rafter ties are for,
which
are in the lower third of the triangle. So
you get me all excited, smiling.
And it was interesting. I was talking about that to the building inspector, because on our plans we had collar ties spec'd 48 inches on center, and I wanted a little bit more flexibility, so I was thinking about reaching out to our architect and seeing if they would write a note that we could, be more flexible with the collar ties and just strap from rafter to rafter over top of the ridge. And we ended up not doing that, but the inspector was under the impression that, the collar ties are keeping your walls from moving out. But and I was under that same impression, but it's interesting that where it's at, and you kind of like look at it and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. It's tying these two together. That would keep the walls from moving out, but it's not doing that. And I think there's so many things like that people just think they have an understanding of, and they kind of just take it as, yeah, that's what that does. That's why that's there, but they don't really understand, and it limits them being able to do some different things, especially when it comes to design. Like if we wanted to, we could have taken out all of those collar ties, strapped from rafter to rafter. Our architect would have approved it, and we would have been fine. But it took me looking into it to know that, know that that's even a possibility.
Yeah, and it's been a possibility for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I collect vintage code books, and I am fun at parties. Okay, I collect vintage code books and vintage construction guides, because previous to code books, you get into federal guides and things like that. And collar ties, rafter ties, like these concepts go back 100 years, and I feel like a lot of that's been forgotten. A lot of construction has become now assembly line. I remember doing inspections on apartment complexes, wood frame, 3-story, and they're not just one framing crew. There was a wall crew, a floor crew, a truss crew, and a truss sheathing crew. And all they do all day is set trusses. And all these guys do all day is build walls. So even the job as a framer, and plumbing is like that. You've got the different plumbing. Now, one guy, all I do is the trim. All I do are the undergrounds. And so we've systemized out for business purposes. I get it. Like, that's why we all work. But what we've done is, unfortunately, I think, I hate to say it, I wish I had a more friendly way to say it, like dumbed down the construction industry. And I don't mean that to be negative, but lack of a better way to say it. We're losing some of our skills and some of our arts.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is still embedded in the basic prescriptive design provisions of the code.
Yeah.
A lot of framers don't even know how to cut in a roof anymore. All they know is trusses. So how can we expect them to understand the concept of a rafter tie? Trusses have it built in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really interesting, because obviously everywhere you go, and especially in New Jersey, there's apartment complexes and condos and everything being built super close together and really big, and it's essentially almost the same thing that we do. We're building, we're cutting stuff, we're building a structure, but it's so different because people like the carpenter unions by us, like, you would think, they I don't know, they do carpentry, they do whatever, but really all they're doing is like metal studs and drop ceilings. Like, that's what they do by us. That's like what the carpenters unions do. So it's funny that has become so kind of ingrained in us to systemize everything to that extent, where somebody that's a framer really might not know anything about how to cut rafters, which is just like, seems like such a basic thing. And I guess that's necessary to build these gargantuan apartment complexes in the time that they do, and everything's trusses and everything like that, so you don't need to, but it's I think it takes a little bit of the just that full picture understanding of what we're doing and how all the pieces come together to create this thing that won't fall down, hopefully.
No, so true.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the toughest things as an inspector doing, I was doing building, plumbing, mechanical inspections, and, just each individual trade did what they were supposed to do right, but they overlap and brutalize each other's work on top of each other. I mean, some of the photos I have are just ridiculous, where it's like, well, everything would have been fine if these two trades just understood a little bit about each other's trades.
Yeah.
And, weren't stepping on each other's feet. It's like the choreography of a big dance show of a bunch of dancers. They don't only know their moves, they have an awareness of other people's moves, and they cue off other moves, or same with actors. And I've never been in that industry, but I'm pretty sure they prepare together as a group so that the final presentation, no one's stepping on each other's toes. Yeah. But we're losing that. We don't see that these days in construction the same as we used to.
Yeah, it's like taking the craft out of it. You're just in there to get a job done, and then...
Well, it's a lot more, things have become more of an installation process than a craft process. Yeah. Like, I have, a 1940s, 1930s federal government book on framing. For framing a house, building a house, and you go in there, and it's giving you engineering education. It talks about deflection, it talks about tension and compression in the chords of the joist. It talks about notching and why, and it gives these details. And it's talking about a craft, a trade, a skill. It seems like the similar type of documents these days are more about how do you install it.
Yeah.
Do step 1, step 2, step 3. Now go to the next one and make some money.
Yeah. That's very true, and I think we've talked. That is definitely a reality in the trades in general, and with I guess just capitalism. Build more, faster, bigger, quicker. At the minimum standards for passing inspection, and we see a lot of that with developments that go up and all that kind of stuff, where we are adding on a deck with the roof structure, and we're like, they used OSB to span this roof sheathing when it's 24 on center, and I didn't even look into it long enough to see whether or not it was technically to code or an engineer would pass that, but I'm like, I know that as we're tying into this, I don't want to walk on this because I'm scared I'm gonna fall through it, because it's just like, if it is passing, it's the very minimum. So I think we've talked about that enough. What do you think about the other side of that? Because I think we are seeing a lot of people that, kind of like you with the codes, and a lot of people on the building science side of it that are almost to a comical degree trying to perfect things like insulation and all of these kind of values to really perfect something and go the complete opposite end of the spectrum. What do you think about some of those people that are just, we're already building amazingly well-crafted homes, and they're making it their mission to just further building science to, get to these ridiculous amounts of insulation and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's, these are tough and controversial subjects in society today. I have to say that in general, I think one of our important things that we shouldn't forget about is affordable housing. Is that a house, first and foremost, the very first thing a house is human shelter. And, watch your survival shows on TV. I love them. What do you need to do, right? Find water, shelter, and you can wait for food. Food, your body can go. But those are the three things: water, shelter, and food. And we all understand that. But then when we get into talking building codes, I feel like we tend to bring our preferences, our desires. We want to lead the code. And truthfully, a lot of the voices, I believe, that are out there for increasing energy efficiency, increasing sustainability, increasing the perfection of the human shelter, unfortunately, I'll say it, is they're not folks that are just wishing to own their own home someday. They're probably not folks living in an apartment complex that's run down somewhere. And dare I say, someone that's experienced homelessness before, which I haven't. But their voice wanting to progress building codes in that direction, I respect, I appreciate. I dream of building a zero-energy house myself. I'm not against any of it. But I know that voice comes from a place of have, not have not. Yeah. That voice is not worried about having human shelter. That voice is as wonderful for them. They're at a privileged, they've earned that privilege. I don't mean, be so careful what's a negative word. They've earned their way to be where they are in the world. That is wonderful for them. So for them, the idea of just affordable human shelter is out of touch. Like, let's push the envelope further. And those folks, I'm like, hey, if you can't sell increased insulation levels to the family living in an apartment, just hoping someday to have a backyard, then you need to sell it to them. And you need to figure out why it's important to them, not just you and your buddies that have nice cars and nice houses. And it's a hard pill to swallow, but the people that are making these choices that can go and contribute to code hearings and can be involved with that, they're not struggling for shelter. They're not barbecuing in the mud. Let's make decks better and better, like more decay resistant, more hardware. Let's increase the live loads. Those people aren't barbecuing in the grass and just hoping for a deck. So we need to bring in other voices, and we need to get that balance. So that's kind of my feelings. I'm not against that movement.
Yeah.
Building science is a subject I love to teach. I've been teaching a lot about it lately. I've been teaching at the Building Science Symposium. I'll be going to Maryland for the 4th edition of that symposium. It's put on by the BS and Beer guys. And supported through Fine Home Building. So I teach a lot of building science. And one thing I can say with building science is some of the changes we're seeing in the code are legit, and they're fixing some of the mistakes we made in the past, like insulating without thinking of how that affects dew point temperatures. And we can see that we created a lot of the decay in our buildings through our efforts to make them better, but not fully thinking through the science. And I want to get into that tangent. So some of those changes in building science are allowing more choices. Like in Colorado, it used to be warm in winter side, poly vapor retarder warm in winter. That's on the inside. That's a Class 1 vapor retarder. The newer 2021 code now offers options for using a Class 2 vapor retarder or a Class 3 vapor retarder, and you can use those in combination with exterior continuous insulation. So rather than controlling the vapor moving into the assembly, you simply control the temperature within the assembly. And that's another way to stop condensation. Using ventilated cladding, that allows that vapor to drive through the assembly and dry to the outside. Now you can use a Class 3 vapor. So what it's done is it's expanded your options. When what used to be poly on the warm and winter side, now you've got 5 different options in this climate zone.
Yeah. You lost me a little bit there. I was trying to hang on as much as I could, and I was losing it. And I was like, now I know what he's talking about.
I wanted to make.
Yeah, yeah.
If you're still thinking pot lake, then look at how much people that should be knowing that are dealing with building wall assemblies. If that was confusing or shocking, hey, guess what? Then you need to get up to speed with the latest code.
I love what you said about housing being affordable, because that's. I just think that you're a really good ambassador for what you do, because that's something that I wasn't even thinking about with when it comes to codes, and that is a basic human right, and like it's the definition of the American dream to have home ownership, all these things, and that is something that we have to balance, the safety and the durability of a structure, but also not driving it to a point where it's not attainable for a huge majority of people. I just think that's like just really eye-opening to think. We don't think of building codes in that way. We just think it's the inspector trying to, pardon my French, bust our balls for no reason, because they're annoying, but like it is. And I just think that was like impactful for me, at least, to think of it in that way.
I mean, if you go to the section of the IRC, purpose or intent, they changed the titles. I think it's called purpose now. But it spells out at the very beginning in Chapter 1, what is the purpose? What is the intention of this code? And it lists, right, sanitation, fire safety, structural stability. But you know what the first one is on the list? And it's not because it's alphabetical: affordability. Affordability is listed just as important as structural safety. And so when I teach building inspectors out there, because that's a huge part, that's where most of the industry for teaching code is. I'm trying to reach a new market. But I teach them that I say, look, you are as much a defendant, a protector to your community of their structural safety, sanitation, energy efficiency, and you are also there to protect their affordability. It's listed right with all the other things. And even the building inspectors, boy, they need that message a lot, to be proud to pass something that they would never allow at their house. Because what you are protecting is that other American citizen, your communities, you're protecting their affordability for their dreams to come true. And that should be something in building inspectors are proud and honor and go to bed at night and think, I'm so glad I caught that steel beam that was missing. And then the next night you can go to bed and say, I'm so glad I pointed out to that builder that they didn't have to make their handrail continuous across the landing. And they were able to reduce the cost of that construction. And man, I protected that citizen of unnecessary costs for them to have their dream. If you are not a building inspector proud of providing that to your community, I encourage you to find a different career. And I'm going to say that as hard as I said it, because it's right there. Affordability is right along with all the other things. And when you write a code change proposal, it is mandatory to write a cost impact statement. You can't just propose anything you want. You have to say, will this increase the cost of construction, decrease, or remain the same? And the International Code Council has gotten very hard about that. You actually have to do research. I put a proposal forward related to fire-rated drywall, and I had to calculate like an estimated amount of sheets of drywall, figure out the local costs of drywall, and then try to provide a legit estimate. And they still refused it. They wrote me back and said, your cost impact statement isn't sufficient enough for this proposal to move forward. So it is such a key part of it, that affordability.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
that is something I would have never thought about. That's really eye-opening.
Once again, you have made building codes very exciting and entertaining. I think one other thing I wanted to know, because I have seen your very, very extensive library of historical building code, I don't know, what do you call it? Editions?
Yeah, code books.
Yeah. How many do you have?
I haven't made an updated count recently, but I'd estimate I'm getting close to 1,000.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Yeah, the last count was a while ago, and I was well over 750, and I can think of a few big donations. I literally just today I got an email from a building department in Colorado with a picture saying, "Hey Glenn, these books are going to the dumpster. Do you want them?" And so I've started a code book giveaway thing as well on my Instagram, because some of these books I get they're within the last 20 years, and we still have a lot of governments
that are
on
so
those
abiding
codes.
that. Yeah.
So where the picture I got had like 2015 and 2018 codes that are haven't even, so they were going to throw them away. So yeah, I end up getting a lot of these big donations because my colleagues know in code, and don't throw your books away.
And one thing that I realized, I saw you, I think it was a code book about fire codes, maybe sprinkler codes or something that was it was maybe 1915 or something. It was really a long time ago. I think when you see that, you kind of like equate it to a time when it's like they seem like more necessary. Like you see the value of those codes more because it's like, oh yeah, in 1950, like people were dying in factory fires because there's no fire escape, there's no sprinkler system. Like I think we don't necessarily equate that as much anymore because there's other factors. So, but still, people are dying in fires because of the not enough fire protection and fire blocking and all that kind of stuff. But I just think you kind of like think of those things that you hear about, like the what is it, the triangle waste whatever, where the whole building went up and people were trapped and a lot of people died. And when I saw that, it seems like at that point, for whatever reason, it's like that's why it was started to prevent that. And I think it can get so convoluted now that it's you kind of like, it's easy to forget that is like those initial tenets of why this exists and why it's important. So
well, that's cool. I'm chomping at the bit to respond to that. Because it's true, and I sometimes feel this way about just other legislation in general, our lawmakers, our Congresses, and stuff. It's like when you hear you hear them called lawmakers, the lawmaker, the federal law, and it's like, well, maybe they don't. Maybe is there a point where we don't need to make laws? Like, is there a point where we have enough laws? And I think about that in that respect, but it's in a way very much the same way with the building code. Like, and I think you hit on something correct. You're absolutely right. Those earlier years of building codes, we were coming up with fundamental new concepts about human egress behaviors. What do we do in a panic? Why can't we see the door that's right in front of us? Oh, because it's actually masked with like learning through unfortunately horrible tragedies. We made major impacts in this country in safety. And we're at a point now where I do tend to believe we're able to now work on the code out of convenience. And what I mean by that is when you're looking at the IRC, that book is more choice than it is mandates. Now, if you go back to 2015, it was all about mandates, right? Just, look, these are the things we can't do because it's killing people. You get now, and the IRC is like a cookbook. It's a book full of recipes for construction. So you compare the 2000 IRC to the 2021 IRC. The 2000 is like 560 pages. The 2021 is 1,100 something pages, so almost double in page count. But it's not double in mandatory restrictions or protections. It's providing new recipes. So we have, insulated concrete forms and SIP panels. You can do steel framing and you can do wood framing. You can build your headers in 5 different ways. We have appendix to the IRC that are separate adoptable chapters. There's straw bale construction. You want to know how to build a house out of straw bale? The IRC has a recipe.
Really?
Straw clay, where you're matting together clay with straw. That's in there. Tiny houses are in there. There was the recent one that just made it, hemp lime. Hemp lime construction will be in the 2024 code. So these aren't more rules for our life safety. They're not more infringements on our freedom. They're actually just more recipes given to us to just follow. Like, hey, here's a way you can build. And so that's where I think some of the current growth. I can think of a lot of the big heated arguments and things that were happening in recent code hearings I've attended, talking about energy storage systems. Well, until those were created, we didn't figure out the hazards of them, the thermal runaway when they're burning up and the batteries are burning. Oh my gosh, this is a hazard. Then we're going to follow that with some codes. So we're also following all these new technologies. One exciting thing is your wind loads seismic zone loads and snow loads, a number of these different environmental loads, there's now actually going to be a internet URL in the website, in the code. First time in history, there'll be a website printed in the code. You can click that and go to an online interactive database, and you can get exact snow load and wind loads for exact locations across the U.S., as opposed to going to a paper map in a book on an 8.5. And so that's an example of like following technology. It's a convenience, right?
Yeah.
So we have figured out a lot of the major life safety stuff that we achieved, decades ago.
That's how long have we been going? I feel like we're like barely scratching.
I feel like I learned so much.
I know.
40 minutes.
40 minutes. Okay. Yeah. All right. We still have some time. All right. I have a question for you.
All right.
I think that you are by far the most educated person on the code, and you really have a good bearing on the fundamentals of why it's important with being affordable. So imagine that you are in complete control of the international code and you make all the final decisions. What are the changes that you would make?
You're going to try to get me in trouble, aren't you?
What do you got?
Yeah. All right. So some of the changes I would make, and thinking about decks or thinking about
everything. You are the authoritarian leader of international code.
There are some changes. There are some changes I'm aware of that were made in the code that I don't think were done through ethical practices. I think they were done by folks that went to the code hearings not to contribute alongside others for the best choices and end result for the American people, but people that went there with the intention to win for what they want. And
sell a
if
product.
That's the intention, they will. In this case, it could number of things, but
we'll keep it vague.
They want to win what they want because of what they want. And so even though the system is, I think the ICC system is excellent in terms of how to develop these codes, transparent, bringing everyone together. But any system is only as good as the people involved in it. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to call things out, but I may. But there are two particular very big instances that I feel like weren't ethically put in the code. And they weren't, and they gamed the system for them. And one of those, I would say, is the residential fire sprinklers. And I just made a lot of enemies by saying that. But residential fire sprinklers were put into the code, the first major edition, 2009. The way that it went about was just not an ethical way. It was legal, it was acceptable, but legal doesn't always mean morally right. That in the heart of hearts you don't say, yeah, I kind of gamed it. And I think everyone knows it was gamed. And then we see that when after that happened in the code, more than 50% of the states in the U.S. had to write legislation specifically prohibiting any local governments from requiring citizens to do that. Yeah. So that tells me that we tried to come up with codes to recommend to governments at the ICC level, and the government said, yeah, we don't like it. And now it's been well over a decade, and I've seen too many instances where, like I said, you probably shouldn't say the things like I'm saying, where people folks are afraid to challenge it. And it's been so ingrained in here now that I don't think anyone, I've thought many times of coming out and challenging it, only challenging it to say this needs to come back to the table, and we need to rediscuss it again. And if we as a collaborative group through the ICC process still think this is valid and we want to continue to promote this to governments, then we should. But it feels like you can't put it on the table again because it's fire sprinklers, it's life safety. Oh my gosh, this children died in the past and this and that. So that's one that I don't think should necessarily be pulled from the code, but I think does need to be revisited and get more honest involvement. And then I'm sorry about the energy code. There was some shady stuff that happened, I believe, from the 2018 to the 2021, and that's why we see a major increase in energy requirements in the 21. And again, there was a particular group involved with that, and I think they were involved to win and not involved to work together in America and compromise. So those would be two things. I would back off some of the insulation values in the 2021 IRC. In this climate zone, it's R60. Mm-hmm. And I would definitely back that back down. And I'm saying literally 2 weeks ago, I spent a week crawling around in a 412 pitch attic, hitting my head on collar ties, and I put R70 in my attic.
Yeah.
So I'm not against insulation. I could afford it.
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about filling my fridge. I have food. I could afford to spend money on the insulation. So but as a minimum code, I would believe that should be backed off.
I think that obviously energy codes and all that is such a big push with just increasing energy demands of our country and supporting all of the electricity needs that we have. But it seems to me like almost a Band-Aid on something that is going to need a different solution later. It's trying to preserve every bit of energy from our current grid when it's very apparent that we're going to need alternative energy sources. We can up the insulation values of everything. We can do all of these things, and it's going to maybe slow the growth of our energy needs, but eventually we're going to have some sort of alternative energy sources to solve this problem long term. We can't just adding more insulation isn't going to make the coal last forever, the oil last for the next 100 million years. It's we're trying to get a little bit more out of that, and population is still growing no matter what. Energy use is going up, so I think it's important, and I think one thing I learned today is that goes against the affordability aspect of it, which it seems like there are some people have ulterior motives, and housing and building is a big industry, so there's a lot of people that no matter what the code is, manufacturers and lots of industries can make or lose a lot of money depending on the code that comes out. So I think that opens it up to people not having the right motives. But
energy, energy is that example. I can't say it enough. I'm not against energy efficiency, doing better for our planet. I'm not.
Yeah.
But I know there has to be balance, and I also know that the truth behind it is that it's very much a federal government funded movement. Ever since the 1970s. And that's like a whole hour podcast in and of itself. But the federal government has no authority over building codes. They have to write proposals just like anybody else. Department of Energy has been at the ICC hearings with their proposals. What they can provide is funding. They can offer, and so since the 70s, there's been grant after grant, funding opportunity after funding in order to encourage state governments to increase their energy efficiency. And so if the motivation to respond, the state governments, if they bring up their energy efficiency to certain levels, they can receive this federal funding to do wonderful things in their community. That's all wonderful. Money makes the world go round, like it or not. But as a proud member of We the People, if the motivation of the state and local governments to change the regulations of the built environment that the people are living in, if that motivation is coming from federal funding, it's the wrong motivation. It needs to be coming from the people. So it's that example where I feel like the code is leading society instead of society leading the code. So when it comes to energy efficiency and solving that crisis and problem in this country, I think the biggest thing is we need to change the human behavior. We need to convince society it matters, that it's important.
Yeah.
And then let them be the ones asking for these higher insulation levels and these things, and let it come that direction.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, and I think it ultimately lends itself to needing some more renewable energy sources, some sort of I don't know much about energy creation, whether solar is a good option or wind or whatever, but something renewable at some point needs to be a viable option to keep us on this path that we're on of energy use without the complete destruction of our society. So hopefully maybe somebody that's listening will get on that. Maybe. Yeah, if anybody's got any input on that, that'd be great. Yeah. So,
and there's great movements in those directions. A lot of folk with the ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps that can then use electrification. And then if you're using electrification, you can create that electricity on site, via solar, wind power. So, we're seeing the movements in these directions, but they have to be balanced with that we still have to house our fellow humans.
Yeah.
And that nothing is destroying energy uses as bad as our existing stock of homes.
Yeah.
That's why I spent the first week of this year in that attic sealing top plates and insulating, because I finally got embarrassed enough that I live in a 1950s house that was leaky, energy hog. My electric bills were crazy, but I'm busy working. I'm trying to make a living.
Yeah.
But it hit me like I'm teaching at these building science symposiums now and teaching this. It's time to invest in my own house.
Yeah.
But I'm the problem. How many years did I go just paying unfortunately high energy bills before I finally got the motivation to be like, man, I need to get up there and insulate this attic and get that covered. So I think that's what we need more of. We have to drive this from the people, and then the changes will be more long lasting.
Yeah. It's something that the people want. They're not forced to comply with. It's not an order. It's a request from them and for them. I think that's...
the energy code requires, like in commercial, they require vestibules for if you're over a certain size square footage. I think it's like 3,000 now. I can't remember off the top of my head. That's great. That's fine. A vestibule, 2-door operation so that you create the airlock and you're not bleeding it out. I have so many pictures for education where I go establishments that have jammed open one of the doors. So it's just like your code is only as good as people willing to maintain it, understand it, and continue it. So willful compliance that comes from the people is the longest lasting, and the most effective. Makes the most effect out there.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it comes back to education.
It does.
Like when I worked in commercial real estate, there was tons of people that would do stuff like that, and you're like, they don't even know it. So there are these LEED certified, environmentally friendly buildings, but then people would do stuff like that, and you're like,
exactly.
You're bragging about this thing, and then you are completely ignoring all of the benefits that it had. So
I got my newest car I've ever got recently. I drive older cars, but I got a 2016 Outback recently. I was driving my '99 Land Cruiser. I kept it. I still don't know anything how to function that car. So I'm saying is like I've been provided all this fancy stuff in this car that does all this ridiculous fancy stuff, and it's like, okay, but unless I can engage with it and understand it and want it and care about those features, they're never actually going to do anything for me.
Yeah.
But they look really good, in the specs, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Same random analogy, but same kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I feel like I have so much to digest from this episode. I feel like I've learned
I
a
need
lot.
to read the code book.
Yeah, I know. It's like you explain it in a way that makes it sound like a best-selling novel. That like you have to, with the way you just introduce the intent or whatever you say. This was designed. It's almost like the beginning of a great story. And I think if builders can look at it in just a different light, because especially when I first started, it was like I looked at all these little code things as just they're just trying to bust our balls for something. When when you look at it a different way and you kind of look at it with some fascination and some curiosity, it's almost like you can look up one thing and then kind of go down a rabbit hole like, oh well, how does this affect this thing? Let me flip to this page, and then you get more understanding of, it's not just a rote memorization of a code, it's an understanding of the underlying principles. And I think that's the part that's interesting that gets not really addressed or talked about. People just
the book doesn't
kind of
tell you the why.
Yeah.
It just gives you the end results of it. You have to almost either trust the system that came before it, but then it's just black and white words. Then you don't know how to adapt those words into all the various conditions and applications that we see out there, where you have to know why the words say it, so then you can know how to be flexible with that. And that's where we can all benefit from that understanding, because a builder can't suggest a little flexibility within the intent unless they know it. And the inspector can't approve something that is perfectly fine but not exactly the way it was written unless they understand why it was written that way.
Yeah. I think we've experienced that a lot of times with certain building inspectors just being more like no, you have to do this. And, it might be something that I looked into, and I'm like, well, it actually does, we do have this flexibility. I think the ideal situation is, because there are so many, situations that can be not explicitly explained by the code, it has to, in some capacity, be interpreted. So I think the ideal situation is a building inspector that has a passion and an understanding for the underlying principles, and also a builder that understands the principles, so that on the job site during an inspection, there can be like a collaborative conversation about the end goal, which should be the same on both sides. So
absolutely. And, and for the record, guys, I started in construction as a laborer at age 19. I'm the black sheep of the family without the college degree. My dad's a professor. My daughter's now, or my sister's now a professor. I'm moving to Colorado to go snowboarding, and then I got into construction at 19 as a laborer, and then I've worked my way through that. I finished my basement at my house. I bought my house when I was 23, so 4 years after being a laborer. By then I was building, but I knew what I knew, right? And I finished my basement without a permit. Yep. Like, I'm not shaming anybody for their and that's because I hated the building. I was like, no way, I'm not going to come tell me what to do in my house. I had the arrogance. I had the youthful close-mindedness to being challenged. And I also simply did not appreciate or believe in the value of the building department. But there wasn't a positive voice out there to help me be appreciative. I got in, like a lot of people in Colorado, we don't have unions. You just learn from whoever hired you. So, right, I'm learning whoever hired me. And what do you hear out there in the field, in the trades? Bad mouthing of the inspectors, bad mouthing of the code. So, young guys like me, all they're hearing is bad mouthing. Now, I've since gone back and fixed some things I did that were stupid in my basement, because I did grow and learn better,
Yeah.
But I've been there. I know what it's like to be alienated from a building department where you're just like, you're never coming in here again,
Yeah.
Like, I get it. So both sides have to be willing to be open-minded to the other part of the team, and maybe learn some perspective of that part of the team.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I've been there. So I'm not some goody like judging people that don't like codes or have had bad experiences or have done work without permit. I raised my hand to all three of those.
I think everybody, if they're being honest, can raise their hand for that, especially when they're getting started. And I've definitely been there. But I think it all comes back to just like a desire to learn, a desire to grow. And I think for me, just listening to you speak about the code as put it in a new light for me, and made it interesting. I think, like, this is probably going to be one of the most interesting podcasts for all of our listeners, because normally it's just kind of us talking about all the stuff that we don't really know how to do in business. So, this one is the most knowledge packed for sure. Yeah. So,
now, I got to correct you. Earlier at the beginning of this, you said I'm probably the most knowledgeable person. I'm just very vocal. I have some excellent mentors, so many people that have guided me to where I am, and I know so many code people that are just as sharp or sharper than me. The difference is, I think, with me, is I have a motivation and a passion and a will to share that with the public. And since I'm one of the few people doing that, thank you for the respect. But a lot of people know code. I'm just one that's loud about it.
Yeah. You're the only one I know. You're the only one that's on TikTok, I believe.
Yeah.
You might start a trend.
So good at explaining it.
I've certainly dominated if you search building codes on TikTok. I got to work on Instagram now.
Yeah. All right. I think, we could sit here and talk for the next probably 100 years about building codes, and I would learn a lot. But tell us, if people want to learn some more, because I know you have courses. I know you have, some things. What if people are listening and they want to learn more, they want to take a course, they just want to expand their knowledge, like, where should they go to learn more about what you do?
My website is buildingcodecollege.com. It's not a college. It's just a catchy word. It's a catchy name. Maybe someday, right? But buildingcodecollege.com.
Do you have to take out student loans to go there?
Yeah. No, I'm actually very proud to be. I don't care what the market rate is, because my goal isn't just make as much money as possible. I'm in this for the long game, and I'm in this for making a difference while I'm here, and of course making a living. So I don't base my prices on market value. I'm stupidly lower than comparable education from the code providers that provide, ICC, Red Vector, a lot of these bigger corporations. So buildingcodecollege.com. It's a small company. It's independent. It's completely my voice, so it's not bought out by anyone else. I can say what I want to say. You're learning purely non-biased code education for one purpose only, and that's to learn code. There's no product placement. There's no other agendas into it. They're on-demand courses, and everything's priced at $15 an hour for live webinars as well as on-demand courses. So if it's a 3-hour on-demand course, it's $45. And all of the on-demand courses a 3-hour course will be broken into multiple sessions. Each session has a video, a practice quiz, and then what I call the self-study that links you to other educational information. But the first video of every on-demand course is right there in the course catalog. It's the thumbnail image, and you just click it and watch it. I don't force you to sign up so I can collect your email to market to you. That's, hey, I want to make the education available first. And if you watch, you can go down all my courses, watch those first videos. Some of them are 45 minutes long, and they're not trial videos. They're not partial. They're not going to cut you off. It's the whole first session video. And if you find value to what you learned there, then, I'd hope you'd enroll and help support what I'm doing.
I think that's amazing that you're making it accessible, because one thing that I actually learned was one of the key tenets of the code itself is affordability. Something I've recently learned. So I like that you're using that.
Living your values.
You're so close.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being on here. We will link to all of your stuff. I think everybody can take away a lot from this. If nothing else, if no actual knowledgeable nuggets, just an appreciation for the existence of the code, and maybe a different perspective when the inspector strolls up. Maybe greet them with a smile this time and say, "Hey, thanks for doing what you do." They'll probably be caught off guard, and it might lead to at least a conversation. So. Yeah, I appreciate you being on here. And
to a prepared contractor, an educated contractor whose ceiling is the latest knowledge, the inspector just becomes your back.
Yeah.
They got your back. They're now behind you.
Yeah.
And they're there just to, and that's great. Like the amount, when, being thanked as an inspector, when someone does miss a steel beam or put something, and we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And if you're proud of what you know, then the inspector, like I say, becomes helpful to you. Like someone making sure you didn't miss something.
Yeah.
Isn't that great? Like, wouldn't we all?
And I think most people, or most inspectors in our experience, they do point out stuff that we miss, which I always welcome. But they do it. When you work in a jurisdiction, a couple times you get to know the inspectors, and they see. Yeah, you might have missed this, but they see a bunch of other places where, you really went an extra mile. They know that you're not trying to purposely skip stuff.
Yep.
So I've had inspectors kind of come out and they're like, yeah, you might want to look at these screws that you're using in this application. It's fine. It's completely to code, but, it might be something down the line that doesn't have the shear strength of something else. It's completely good, but hey, it might be something that you want to look into, and I'm always at least interested to learn more about what we can do to make things a little bit better, and if it's using a different type of screw for a certain scenario that might not even be a structural thing, it's more of a detail that's not going to, the structure's not going to fail because of it, but they're there. I kind of go up to them with a willingness to learn and openness, and they'll almost every time they come, I learn something, so it's cool.
Yeah,
and they love that.
You should give yourself a lot of, because that same inspector
appreciate that
treats you like part of the team.
Yeah,
it's because you treat them like part of the team.
Yeah,
because again, it's human nature. When I was an inspector, people who treated me as just part of the team with respect, like mutual respect, I can treat them that way. I can trust them. I have a level of faith and understanding.
Yeah,
I can go to the very same day to a different inspection. and I don't get the same vibe from that person at all, they're not going to get the same inspection from me. Yeah. And so the reason you probably see that teamwork from those inspectors has a lot to do with you presenting that teamwork to them initially.
Yeah, I think that goes for every interaction you have with anybody. It's so if you treat them with respect and just appreciate, even if you don't love the fact that they're there inspecting it, appreciate that they're doing their job. They're there for a reason. They're not there solely to take you down and ruin your day. And you just go at it with a little bit of a different perspective and try to maybe learn a couple things. Then you're going to see their attitude completely change, and everybody's going to be hopefully the better for it.
And isn't that what we want out there, right? In all scenarios, like
I don't want to. We have inspectors come. At least 10% of the days that we're working, we have an inspection scheduled. I don't want 10% of my working days to be all stressed out, like, oh, God, the inspector's going to be here.
Right.
I want to be like, hey, Jack, what's going on, man? Yeah, I want to, and then he'll point something out and be like, you got to do that. And I'm like, all right, yeah, I can't believe I forgot that. Good thing you pointed that out because,
totally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I better stop bringing up more things. I can tell you're like Midwestern. Well, time to go.
I think that we can do this again at the next event that we're at together. I think people are really going to love this episode, and we can talk about so many other things. So I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for waiting around for it. I'm glad that you waited so we could do this.
Definitely. Well, I'm home. This is Deck Superstore.
That's right. We're the ones that we're not going to miss our flight, are we? Is it still?
No,
still
we're
Tuesday?
good. We're still good.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, till next time. This has been the Hardworking Happy Hour.
See you next week.